It's lovely to have you. It's lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Your reputation precedes you.
Oh, very tall, people say. He's a very tall man.
You can't tell on radio, I guess.
No, that's why I try to say it as much as I can. First, so congratulations on The Whale.
Thank you so much.
When you originally saw the play, when did you first see the play?
I saw the play over a decade ago, actually, on off Broadway at Playwrights Horizon, which is a great company in New York, and I think 150, 200 seat theater, and was deeply moved by it and had never seen anything like that in a theater, and reached out to Sam Hunter, the MacArthur Genius winning playwright, and we just started talking. He was a complete gentleman, and that began a very long odyssey to bring it to the screen.
I want to talk about the Odyssey in a second.
Yeah.
Why? Why, when you saw it, what is it about it that made you think I want to?
I think from the original New York Times review, which Sam pointed out was kind of mixed, and that eventually became this groundswell of the public liking it, that really got it moving. But I could just see from the first descriptions of it that it was connected to me in some way. I think the idea of being transported into a character that I completely, on the surface, I'm not connected to, but very quickly realized there was this very shared humanity, was very moving for me. And that's what I love about cinema. One of the greatest things is that you can be transported into characters that if you pass them on the street, you would not see yourself in them. But if you spent a little time with them, they're suddenly, wow, very, very similar to yourself.
It's a great empathy builder.
Well, that's the beauty of cinema, is that it is an exercise in empathy. You can be in the mind of, I just made a film about a 13-year-old girl coming of age in a favela in Brazil, a film called Pacified, a beautiful little movie. And you are that girl for the 2 hours that you watch that movie. So that's cinema for me, is that transport. Or you could be behind the eyes of Paul Newman in any of his movies, where you're in his head and you understand the decisions he's making. That is what I've missed about movies, and why going to the cinema is so important. The biggest problem I have with all the streaming stuff, which is great, and it's amazing how much entertainment we can get at home now, but it's very hard to stay away from a second screen or from distractions, and to actually have that illusion where for that 2 hours you're fully in another character's shoes.
It took you a long time to cast the lead
Yeah.
in The Whale.
Yeah.
10 years.
Took 10 years, and that was the most difficult part of it. I didn't know. Charlie, the lead character that your Canadian hero Brendan Fraser plays, it's a very, very difficult role for many different reasons. It's just incredibly well written by Sam Hunter, and he's a very multifaceted, complicated character. He's both incredibly giving and incredibly selfish. He's incredibly loving, but physically extremely hard to look at. So trying to find that actor who could kind of really bring this internal golden beauty to this character was just very hard. And I spent years meeting different actors and interviewing different actors and thinking all different types of ways of how to do it.
What were they missing, those actors you were meeting? What were they missing that you weren't
None of
getting?
them had the full package. It's hard to say, and I thought about pretty much every movie star.
Yeah.
Problem with the movie star was I just felt that there would be sort of this kind of gimmick where people in the audience would be thinking about as much about the makeup as about the performance. I wanted the audience to really be able to lose themselves in this character. And the thing about Brendan is he has that internal fire of that made him this megastar 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and it's still there. It's when someone's born with that, and I don't know what it is. I've at this point in my life have met many movie stars, and they're people just like you and I, but there's something on the surface of them where you can see into their emotions and you can see complexity in their emotions that makes you want to watch them. And Brendan's always had that. But to be clear, it was never. It just he just really clicked for it. There was no real calculation like, oh, Brendan was great once, and people would like to see him come back.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I understand that. I understand that.
yeah,
It is because to me, when you watch it, there is. I mean, he's Brendan Fraser. I mean, he's a Canadian hero, as you mentioned. But yeah, he is. He's on our currency. But but there's also, he's Encino Man.
yes,
He's Dudley Do Right.
right.
He's George of the Jungle.
None of which those three I haven't seen any
Oh,
of
George of the
them.
Jungle's actually really good.
Yeah, yeah,
And Encino Man's pretty good too. I mean, these are
yeah.
like I'm 35, man. These are important like
Right.
childhood
I,
movies
I,
for
I
me.
was slightly older and I missed them. Of course, I saw the Mummy
Yeah.
films, which were my generation's films, but I missed a lot of that. I even missed his dramatic role at Gods and Monsters. It came out the same year my first film came out, Pi,
Yeah.
and I was working on that and missed it. So I haven't. I really didn't see his work. It was just spotting him, and I don't know if you heard the story, but I spotted him in the trailer of a very low budget Brazilian film. For
Yeah.
some reason, I saw it on the internet, and a light bulb went off, and I was like, "Oh, that guy can do it." And I had no idea if he could act or what type of human he was or any of that. But I gave him a ring, and he came by my office in Chinatown in New York, and he was just such a gentleman and sweet guy, and I could just see deep inside he really wanted to work. And he didn't even know what I was talking about. He came in blind. I was just like, and he was feeling me out too. Why do you want to see me? What's going on? But everyone around me was sort of like, they were like that's kind of interesting, but they thought it was a bit weird. And then we put together a reading in the East Village in Manhattan in February 2020, about 2 weeks before the pandemic.
Wow.
And he was just spectacular. It was just chills.
It's beautiful to see him. It's really beautiful to see
Yeah,
him.
yeah.
And I don't want to say you can't remove him from the character. Like
Right.
like you do eventually.
Right.
Like when you first see him, you were like, holy God, that's Brendan Fraser. I haven't seen
Right.
him. But you know what it reminded me of is the in the Wrestler.
Yeah.
With Mickey Rourke, who I always thought him to say Mickey Rooney,
Which would be great. I'd love to bring Mickey Rooney back. I was a big fan back.
and I'd love to wrestle Mickey Rooney, but but
Yeah.
I think I could take him at this point.
Exactly.
But is there something? And I know you said to me earlier, this is not about I wanted to revive his career
Yeah.
or anything like that. But is there? I can't help but make a connection. Is there something about taking an actor who I, as an audience member, might have preconceived notions about and putting them in a different situation at least?
There are definitely connections there, but it's not in any way a calculation on my side
course.
or a connection of it. I do like hungry actors. I like actors that want to work. Generally, the characters that I am attracted to in scripts are not just black spirited characters or white spirited characters. They're complicated characters with very complicated morality, and they often have to have a lot of self-humor and self-critique and be willing to put themselves out there emotionally. And you want to find actors that want to go there. A lot of actors sometimes want to get perceived in a certain way because they're trying to build a certain version of themselves. I try to avoid that. I look for characters that are searching to do honest emotions that I find are actually more human, because I think that's one of the great gifts of cinema is that we can live, once again, through these characters and actually learn something about ourselves and take it home with us.
But to do that, the actors, I understand, they need to commit fully to the role. I know
Yeah.
it's an overused word, but they need to be fully of themselves, and they can't be worried about how this is going to play out for the next, if they get a Marvel
Yeah.
movie, blah blah blah. I get that, right?
Because a lot of actors have tried that. I mean, if you think about an actor going to acting school, that's what they do, right? They go to acting school to basically sob and scream Stella and basically rip their heart open.
Yeah, yeah.
But as their careers go, sometimes they end up in roles where they get a little burnt,
Yeah.
showing their emotion where they're really
Oh,
good,
yeah.
and they're kind of like flowers. When to open up a actor is to reveal their heart, and if they get burnt, they get nervous and scared. So you have to find the actor who's like not worried about that right now and wants to really wants to shine and go for it, and then you have to establish trust that you're
How
going
do
to
you
take
do
care
that
of them.
with Brendan? How do you establish that? What do you say to
Well,
him?
I'm kind of lucky at this point because I've done it enough time that actors trust me that I'm going to take care of them. But as a young director, and what I would say to young filmmakers if they're listening, is you just spend time and you're very, very honest with them about what you're trying to accomplish. You don't play games, and you say what you really want to go for, and they then have to decide in their grown-up ways if they want to do that.
You also have in this film a challenge ahead of you in that there's no shortage historically of criticism of films where actors wear prosthesis. Is that how we pronounce that?
Sure.
Prosthesis?
Prosthetics, prosthesis.
Prosthetics.
That's fine. Prosthesis. Yeah.
It's one of those
Makeup,
makeup
appliances.
to be bigger, to be people would talk about fat suits, people would talk about prosthesis, all
Right.
these things. I know this was on your mind going in.
Of course.
Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, there is a long history of it. Unfortunately, it's a very sad history, and it's often done in incredibly poor ways, usually for jokes or for derision. Is that how you say the
Derision,
word?
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If that character in the Mike Myers movies is a perfect
Yeah,
example.
Eddie Murphy and I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually what they're doing is they're just cutting a slice of foam
Yeah.
that has absolutely nothing to do with the human body,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not how the human body is. And the characters themselves are purely to be laughed at or the butts of jokes. This is the exact opposite. This is about creating a character that most of us, or the majority of people on the planet, have a lot of prejudices towards. And within 5 minutes of the movie, we're inviting you to be like, wow, there is a human in that skin. And so it's very complicated for people to sort of deconstruct, because the immediate response is a response that is protective, and that is important to be out there. But Sam Hunter, our screenwriter, who actually obesity was a big part of his lived experience, really wanted to represent how it feels to be that type of person and to create a truly well-rounded, deeply human character. So I think within 5 minutes, once again, of watching the film, your heart starts to change and you start to see, wow, you can't judge a book from its cover. There is a person inside there that matters. Outside of that, the technology we use to create the appliances to create the Charlie character out of Brendan
Yeah.
was kind of a breakthrough. We didn't use cut foam and stuff. We tried to make a body that moved like a human body, with techniques that have never been done by another incredibly genius Canadian, Adrian Moreau, who is a prosthetics master. He's a true makeup master. He's out of Montreal. I've been working with him since The Fountain, and he was actually probably the second or third phone call I made, which was basically like, is this possible? Can we make a fully emoting, realistic human so that we can sort of smash apart all of those cliches and terrible, terrible examples of the past, and sort of welcome an audience into the humanity of Charlie, this character.
I appreciate that. I think it's but I think it's a disservice to your film when I see it talked about as a film about a bigger man
Yeah.
Because there's a whole other part of the film, and I'm going to do my best to talk about it without spoiling anything.
Yeah.
And you can let me know.
I don't think you can spoil the
Okay.
film.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
I'm not worried about that.
Okay. Because one word that keeps on coming up in the film over and over and over again. So Charlie, in addition to being this bigger man, is a college professor. He teaches online. He has his camera off. People can't see him, and he's imploring his students to write honesty, to write honestly with about their lives. He has a daughter who he's estranged from. She comes over. He says, I'll write your essay. I'll write the thing that's going to give you an A, but I want you to write something honest about yourself. Honesty is a weird thing. Because if you're not careful, films about, and I worried that this is where we were going to go when we were watching the film, is it can go into that Holden Caulfield-y, everyone's a phony except for me, honesty.
Right.
Dave Van Ronk, the great folk singer, has this awesome line, which I sort of think about a lot, which is, honesty is the real killer because you can hurt someone and feel self-righteous at the same time. The honesty you're talking about in this film in terms of writing, from a writer, is almost like a childlike beginner's mind honesty. The essay that comes up, I'm not going to spoil who wrote it. Yeah. But the essay that comes up in Moby Dick is there's they distract me from the whale.
The sadness of the whale.
With all these these not chapters and whale chapters. I bet it's because the story's so sad. Yeah. And that's why he didn't want to go back to it. Yeah. Melville didn't want to go back to it. Didn't want to go back to it.
Love it.
That's a different kind of honesty.
Interesting.
Than the whole Caulfield-y honesty.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about honesty in this film.
Yeah, I think, look, it's a very interesting thing because there's a lot of Charlie has a lot of dishonesty with himself. Yeah. But he wants honesty from other characters. And I think he is looking for that emotional truth where people can truly express how they feel and what they are thinking. It's
so are you, right?
Well, I think it's very important for me to have honest characters, meaning that the characters themselves not necessarily are honest in their words, but that they are truthfully portrayed on film. Because I think film, it's become about superheroes and good and bad, which I am not critiquing in any way. I'm a fan. Yeah, yeah. And characters, they just don't really represent who we all are as people, and that's the honesty I'm interested in. Is people live in the gray, and we all are playing with those thoughts. And the thing about great writing. And I believe what Sam Hunter did in his play and then in his screenplay is great writing, is he shows those challenges of characters that, are walking all different ways where they're incredibly dishonest with themselves. And Charlie is just constantly trying to push them to be truthful and honest. And I think really that's what makes great art, is when people are honest. Seeing Spielberg's movie last night, which was an amazing film, that was for me the most remarkable thing is the maestro bearing his heart for the world. And that's what I love, is when you can see a great piece where you recognize because that's what connects us. I always talk about it when I teach. It's the more specific your honesty can be in the story you tell, the more global it is.
So again, the more specific
you can be, the more honest you can be in the specificity of your reality, the more global it is. So people go, oh, no one's going to be interested in the way I make my pizza dough or something, or whatever your character does, or the way I can make a shoe, or the way I speak.
In The Whale, the tip stuck out for me. Charlie's character eats pizza 2 slices at a time. Right. Incredibly specific, but incredibly meaningful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm trying to think.
But that's specific, and
but that's not in the script. I think
that
came. And it must come from someone I witnessed. Yeah. At some point, there was a character that I witnessed, or something, or I'm going to ask Brendan where that came from. Are you talking to Brendan later today or
No,
no?
I'd love
Okay,
to, but
okay.
he's flat out.
Oh, he's fine.
Yeah,
He's a little bit. Well, he would never come back to Canada.
No,
I'm just
he hates us
teasing.
here. Ever since we took him off the currency.
Exactly.
No, but seriously, let's go back to that
Yeah.
because that's really interesting. I find your
Yeah.
filmmaking very interesting. The more specific you can be,
Yeah.
the more universal it is.
It's it's specific in an honest way. That's the key.
It doesn't get successful.
Well, I guess specific means that. I maybe we're saying the same things.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be specific means to be honest, I guess. Yeah.
But doesn't success get in the way of that? Like look back at what is you mentioned Pi earlier, like 24 years ago.
25 coming in January, which is really interesting because we actually get the rights back as filmmakers. When I was a young filmmaker 25 years ago at Sundance,
Yeah.
Jim Jarmusch was my hero, and
Yeah.
he always would get his films back. I think he owns every one of his movies, which is just brilliant.
Right, the studios don't own it. He owns it.
He would basically license them for 7 years. He would get the money out of Japan, I believe it was. I might be making this up.
Yeah.
And then he would license them and get them back. So
Yeah.
he controls all of his negatives. So I demanded that, and somehow they were like, yeah, sure, 25 years. It's been 20, cut to 25 years later. We get it back in January, and this is an exclusive for you. We've scanned it at 8K, which is ridiculous because it was shot on 16 millimeter black and white reversal, and it means the grain in the film will be the size of beach balls, and we're hoping, and we're remixing in Atmos and kind of doing a huge polish on it to do a 25th reunion on Pi Day next year.
314.
Yeah.
When you watch it now. So
Oh, Pi, yeah.
yeah, when you watch it now.
Which I have had to for the first time in 24 years.
Do you miss the lack of expectation that came with that film? Do you miss the lack of constraint that can come with being an emerging filmmaker, or does that never
Yeah,
leave you? You know what I mean?
It did happen to me again with The Wrestler, because after The Fountain, everyone was like, "Oh well, that was a nice filmmaker for 3 films. See you later." So no one was expecting anything with that movie, and I'm hoping that expectations are low with this. I guess it's
You're hoping that expectations are low.
well because it's a very small film. The Whale is like a small film we decided to do during COVID. I really wanted to work during COVID, but I did not want to. It was we started working before the vaccines, and still, if you remember, we were all afraid of dying at
Yeah,
that time. We
yeah.
were washing packages,
Yeah.
but my team really wanted to work, and I felt, oh well, I think it's somewhat responsible to keep people working on a very small film, 5 actors in a room.
Yeah.
No one got sick because of the great work of my producers, and we were able to do this little film. And it is a little film. It just,
But you want to keep
in the
expectations
writing,
low. You want to keep expectations low because people can have certain expectations of a Darren Aronofsky film, and
Yeah.
you want them to not have those going in.
Yeah, I think this for me was about the beauty of the writing, and one of the things I love most about filmmaking is working with actors. So for me, this was a pure focus on working with performance and putting the camera in the right place. So you're not going to get the flashy Darren films or the really conceptually pushing. And it's also not, I guess, I'm surprised. A lot of people are finding it an intense film to watch.
Yeah.
And I think that's because, people still look at people living with obesity as somewhat difficult to look at.
Yeah.
But what I hope is over the course of the film, you learn to love Charlie the way I love Charlie.
A really pivotal juncture in the film, Charlie gets his students to just write anything. Write absolutely anything as long as it's honest.
Yeah.
If that was you in college, what do you think you would have written?
In a fiction class, wow, that's a really hard one. The one thing I could say about that moment is it's actually a real moment that happened to Sam Hunter. Sam Hunter, a lot of this film is autobiographical. In many ways, he was a gay kid growing up in Moscow, Idaho, and was outed in high school, and also was dealing with his own obesity and overeating. And at a certain point, he was teaching at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and it was it was just a basic writing class, and it was very tough for him. And he was so frustrated with it, he just asked his kids to write something honest, and that's what came out. And it's funny that you point out to it because there is a lot of emotional truth behind it. Not to avoid your question.
You're doing a good job, though.
Yeah, exactly.
Solid director move, by the way. You're directing it.
The sidestep.
This is amazing
But
stuff.
if I was to,
What were you like? Maybe I'm.
listen. One thing I do remember very clear, to be honest, and to share with young people out there, is I had no freaking clue what I was going to do with my life till I was a junior in uni. I just had no clue. And every day I'd be walking around going, when's it going to happen? When's it going to click for me? When am I going to know? Because the stress starts to happen in college. You're like, I'm going to be getting out of here soon, and I'm going to have to get a job, and I got to have to pay back, all these things things I owe. But I think it was that fear that was there, that waiting for that to click. And the answer to it is I'm not going to say like, oh, filmmaking showed up and that was the click and it made sense. It wasn't an overnight thing. I just started working in film, and I just enjoyed it. And then I just found myself more and more time spending it. But I still, at that age, had no idea what a director was. There weren't many books like there are now on how to be a director. So I think that's my honest answer. I'd probably write, I'm 19, 20 years old, and I still don't know what the F I'm going to do with my life.
That's a powerful thing to hear from you, to be honest. It really is. It's a powerful thing to hear from you.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to meet you.
I really enjoyed this. Anytime you want to hang out, I'll come back.
Listen, I'll get you to come to Toronto.
Okay, great.
We'll bring Steven Spielberg.
That would be me and Steve. You make that happen. I'm here for 3 hours.
Lovely to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Lovely.
much.
Thank you all.